what do you think education will look like uh, by the time your kids get to university, if that still exists, or in which variation that sort of exists? Like, what's your vision for, since you guys are in EdTech, for education in the next 10 to 20 years? And that's, I know, like 10 years now we're talking is huge. Since everything is exponential, it's like 100 years talking in the past. In terms of delivery, in terms of the types of things that will be taught, and in terms of how they're delivered, is that something you think about?
It is something that I think about. I think there are two ways to approach that. So one is we can think about that, just having a plan for the long term. If things scale well and we, don't run out of cash, before we actually reach sustainability and they're not able to raise other rounds in the future. I think that is something that we keep in mind, and maybe in the next few years we start working on gradually in parallel to everything else we're doing. But right now we're solving a real immediate problem that exists. I'll tell you a little bit about the future of learning in a bit, but I'll tell you that the objective right now is to solve for today's problem, because today's students are suffering. Today's students don't have proper access, don't have, just having a video that is animated, explaining your physics lesson to you, and giving you the ability to engage with it, to interact with the teacher, to interact with other students from other schools on that lesson, being able to have a discussion and a dialogue, improves your learning by 200x. So instead of being in a class with other students shouting and laughing and you not being there and being sick in the morning and not having enough time to catch up, خلاص راحت عليك the subject. Just having that recorded digital version of it at your home, plugged into a learning journey, you see where you're going, you see what the students scored, what the average score for that quiz of that topic is, just enhances your improvement, your understanding by so much. And I think just starting with that and being able to offer that to as many students as we can across the region, and then working on building a proper methodology for how we teach and what we get our teachers to focus on and how we direct kind of the lesson itself, will keep evolving and improving. And as we build AI to kind of curate learning based on students' own development, will take place. So I think in general, I think the educational system is going to shift to asynchronous learning, where each student can learn at their own pace, even if they're within the same class or grade, and not be restricted to the average of that group. And that's what happens when you have a group of 20 people. The teacher probably is teaching at the pace of the 7 to 12 to the 13, and then everyone in the top 10%, and everyone in the bottom 10%, they just kind of get lost, or they get bored and they lose interest, or it's moving too fast and they can't keep up. I think catering to that and understanding that the real world needs different kind of skill set than just scoring high grades on subjects, will start accounting for more. And I think that's where it's heading, and EdTech will help speed it to get there. As we used to say in Careem, to leapfrog.
Yeah. So a couple of comments on that. I think I want to talk more about kind of the future of education, but I think it's really important. You mentioned something that I think gets a lot of maybe people stuck in certain places, maybe entrepreneurs or people that just want to take action on some things. So we're talking about sort of the future of learning, and you're like, okay, but like you kind of started with solving, and what you guys are doing, solving today's problem is, right? So I think it's a very important point to realize that maybe when I've thought of certain things, and I think many people can relate, maybe you can relate at different points of, I want to start to do this or start this business and solve you, and you start to think of the problems that will come up in 5 years' time instead of sort of the problem of today, whereas solving the problem of today will help you solve the problem of today plus one and then today plus two. So I thought it was really interesting that you thought of that. Not you thought of it, you said it, because that kind of outlines where I think a lot of people, including myself in different areas, get stuck. In terms of the future of of education. What do you think about so that's a really interesting idea in terms of asynchronous learning. And I think you're absolutely right. What do you think about in terms of the types of things people are learning? And I ask that because now that education or facts and data and history is just available with your guys' help, right? You're helping democratize that learning or that ability or that access to information. When that information is available to everyone, as it is right now on the internet, what are the things then that you kind of have to learn? Does education sort of shift more from hard factual knowledge to other softer skills in the sense, or like how to deal with all this information that you have? Like that's something you need to learn, right? How to focus. Like in that sense, how do you think education, if you've thought about it, or if you have an idea about it?
We have thought about it briefly. I'm not the kind of person that just I think just kind of fascinates about the future, and I think that's kind of like, it is tempting and it's exciting, but I think it could also be distracting. When we're thinking about the future when the problem is real and the problem is now, and I think as a startup you need to prove traction with the product that you have today, and that's where most of our energy is going. And I would say like 95% of the energy goes to solve today's problem, and then maybe 10% or 5% goes to thinking, okay, what do we do in 5 years if we're so successful and we're going to help shape up the future of education. But I'll tell you that
at Sabri, sort of, like, what would you think about that aside from?
I'll tell you two things. I'll tell you three things. One is I was like in my high school yearbook. There was like this voting in the class, and I was voted to be, grade 12. I was voted to be teacher's nightmare. So I was like the worst student in the world. I hated studying. I just thought about how I get by with studying the absolute least that I can. I hated studying, and I was like always very rebellious, and I didn't like, to follow the rules. And that's why kind of like startup world suited me. But an interesting thing that happened with Abwaab is that we opened up Abwaab, and then we opened up physics. And then this girl comes in grade 9, and she goes through our full catalog of physics. And then she goes of grade 9, and then she does full grade 10, 11, and 12, and finishes all of them, and understands the content completely. And just kind of that, when we learned about this case, and we're like, this is exactly it. This is, if I am grade 9 and I'm weaker, I can go back to grade 8. If I am grade 9 and I'm stronger, I can go to grade 10. I can just excel. And I think, eventually people will start following, what they're passionate about more, and following their heart more with education. And education will be less of, a top-down thing, and it will become a lot more engaging. We have countries like the Waldorf school with following a German methodology for teaching, where you have students up until the age of 6 years old. Their classroom is nature and the forest. And you have all of these new, you have schools now opening up in the US, and even in Saudi, they're starting to follow a new curriculum where grade 10, 11, and 12 are basically open to you to excel at your own pace in any subject. I think around 1,000 schools follow that now in Saudi. So the world will shift towards asynchronous learning that caters to your, learning speed, learning ability, learning interest, and learning path. And then with the development of AI, I think we're going to start learning a lot more about the challenges that students face. When you solve 1 + 1 as 3, usually in a traditional school, you just get, an X mark. But if a computer can analyze why you mistaken that to be 3 and not 2, it can tell you what you need to relearn again, help, get you back on track faster. And so I think the development of AI in education will be a big part of the future. And that's partly what Abwaab is focusing on in that 10% that we have.